This is Phantom Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Sarah Jantausch, career advisor, speaker, and creator of the values-based career method. And how you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you and your listeners tonight and dive into all things values based careers.
Well, we're really happy to have you here. We do have your URL below, www.valuesbasedcareers.com/upcoming dash events. That you don't have to remember that, because once we're published or all the platforms we're on, that's clickable. So on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, which we're on right now, once we're off the air, that will be fully clickable. So letting people know. We're also a featured podcast on the Newsly Network. So later tonight, we'll be on there as an audio only featured podcast. And we are on that network as, again, a featured podcast. But a couple of questions I always have to ask any guest before we get into your story is, what motivates you and why do you do what you do?
Oh, that's a good question. The things that motivate me are being able to be a positive impact in somebody else's life. But what I really mean by that is my career journey has been winding, and it took me a longer than I think I would have liked to get where I wanted to be in terms of the work that really lights me up and it makes me excited to get up out of bed every morning. And if I can help people shorten the gap for themselves, I feel like that makes everything worth it.
That's cool. So I think that's like knowing where everybody's raised on their Tories and why they do things is, kind of is a preface to understanding your story, but maybe step it back a little bit further and go like tell your story that the audience would, things that they should know about you and why you are, where you are now.
Sure. So I started my entrepreneurial journey a couple of years ago. It's been about 4 or 5 years now. And before that, I had a major career pivot. I was working in a government career, had climbed the ladder pretty successfully after studying politics and government in undergrad, and then noticed that there was just kind of something missing. And I was working all the time, took on more projects, committees, all of the things, thinking, this is my value. I'm going to keep working harder and longer hours. And I burnt out
Hmm.
and I was stuck and I had no idea what to do because I was like, I've been promoted several times. On the surface, everything's working. Why is this piece of me that's not happy? And it took a really long time to kind of figure out what that was. I was in a natural transition point because I was working for a governor at the time. Our entire office, like the governor and lieutenant governor, were term limited. So we had an end date and we kind of knew about that way in advance. They couldn't run again. So it's in some ways kind of nice. And I went through a whole exploration period. Did I want to go into government relations? Did I want to do something wildly different? And I made a pivot outside of government and I started doing some consulting and doing some work with nonprofits. And it wasn't the right thing for me. And so I took a pause and I was like, what do I actually enjoy? Like, what works? What enjoys? I talked to people that were around me and I was like, what do I want to spend my time on? And I went back and I took everything that I enjoyed doing, which was helping people and talking about their careers and helping them network in a way that isn't transactional. And I put together a pilot, ran the pilot. I would get off of these coaching calls, helping people with their careers, in which everyone hit their goals, which was blew my mind, to be honest with you. And I would get off these calls and I would not be able to wipe the smile off of my face. And I knew at that point, something is working here.
Hmm.
So I continued working on this business, growing it. And then I added an assessment to my practice. It's called the Pathway Planner. And it tells us core traits and then matches up with some occupational data. And I took it to test it before using it with clients. And it told me my top career was a career advisor. And I go, well, that makes sense. And then I realized looking back when I was in high school, I loved helping people identify their goals and figure out what lit them up and what they wanted to do. And I was also obsessed with these types of assessments. So like Myers-Briggs, DISC, Strength Finder, and I took everyone I could ever get. But at that point in my life, that wasn't something that was nurtured. And so I took that as, don't spend time on that, go in this direction that makes more sense for you. And I did. And so my path to get from this point, from that point to this point, has taken quite a bit of time. And so that's what really inspires me to help other people kind of figure out what that is, because this definition of success that I have today is not a definition of success that I initially thought. And I had to create it for myself. And now I have a lot of fun in my work, fun that I didn't have before in a way that's values aligned.
I think it's really important to kind of know like yourself, because a lot of times people get into careers because they had expectations like, well, yeah, I was a government legal studies major and I was
Okay.
sociology double major, but I ended up going and working in IT, and I still work in IT to this day. And I work as a consultant, and then I do the podcast because I wanted to have a kind of dual life. Like I am a
Mhm.
creative person. I'm a musician. I'm a producer. I'm a podcaster. I like the arts. My wife is a playwright. My daughter is a graphic artist. So I'm come
Wow.
from a family of like artists. I would rather probably be doing art all day, but I don't want to be a starving artist, so I have a good day job.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like you have to know where you are. Like I could have put all my eggs into IT and really kind of burned myself out trying to be type A, but I decided I really didn't want to do that. So I think sometimes you have to kind of know like what you want to do and what train you're on.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the way you put that where you have, like, multiple things going on in your life, right? Like, the job that, like, makes pays the bills and does well, and then you've got these creative pursuits. It falls into this, like, what I call the total vocational impact, because sometimes, like, the right makeup is having a job and then, like, volunteering on a board or something on the side that brings you passion. Your job doesn't have to be that thing. And
Yeah.
there's so many different models for it that we have now that we haven't always had. I love that.
A lot of people like, I know doctors, lawyers, engineers that kind of like, I put all my effort, I got the master's degree, I might even got a doctorate, but then they don't like what they're doing. But
Yeah.
then they kind of feel guilt, like, well, if I got a master's degree, I got a doctorate, like I shouldn't really get out of this because I put all this effort. But if
Yeah.
it's not making you happy, you really got to kind of assess that. Well, that's selfish. If it's not making me happy, I got to do it. And I think, what do you do with people who kind of conflicted like that?
I talk to people in this situation all the time. I typically help mid-career professionals, and they usually have had success. They've been in a career for a long time, and they just feel stuck because they're like, in some cases, right, have student loans and like they've invested 10, 15, 20 years in this field. To change that feels like they would be losing something. Or the really common belief is I'm supposed to work in the field that my major was in. And if not, I'm doing something wrong. And in reality, it's about 75% of people don't work in the field that their major was in.
Yeah, I found that out because everybody expects, where I'm is to be comp sci.
Yeah.
And what happened in IT is there's a subfield called business analysis.
Mhm.
And business analysis is kind of like writing research papers or theses all the time. It's more like a liberal arts background.
Interesting.
I went to Bowdoin. And so I found this niche 20 years, 5 years ago, where you didn't have to be a programmer. It was like you had to be kind of a jack of all trades, but more of a kind of like renaissance person that could talk to an IT person, but talk to a
Oh.
business person and talk to a person that doesn't know anything about IT and kind of be the middleman and
Mm.
be able to kind of translate both ways. And I thought, well, ooh, that's the sweet spot. And a lot of times there are positions in the world where you don't exactly think you have the qualifications, but you could actually be working for Microsoft as like a PhD in literature because of AI. Because you could be working on learning libraries and understand the linguistics. So sometimes there are things that you might not expect that you could actually entertain working for them.
Absolutely. I think that's what's hard to find sometimes. I had a client who had a pretty traditional background in government and ended up applying to a job that I didn't think they were ever going to hear back from. That was like CPA preferred, law degree preferred, all of these degrees. They didn't have any of that. They applied, but they had a similar skill set and they got an interview and they were like, okay, this isn't going to go anywhere. They did well in the interview. They got the job and they were like on paper 50% qualified, but when they got into that job, it was a perfect fit in terms of job alignment. And so sometimes say no to ourselves before we even put ourselves out there because we read something on paper. But that job, like you just said, that's such a unique kind of field that we don't think of. And there are really interesting jobs, and you don't have to be totally aligned on paper.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think it's a little concerning with all the AI automation being done on some of these job boards. Like you get on LinkedIn and Indeed, it used to be that you would actually get like a real human being recruiter talking to you. Now it's like I've heard it's like 1%, 5% hit rate based on your profile because it seems like the algorithms are looking for exact acronyms, exact
Yeah.
information, and then they're not taking a risk, like you said. It's like sometimes if you talk to the person, you'd find that they're aligned even though they don't have the acronym you're looking for. They don't have the certification you're looking for, but maybe they show they've got the ability to learn on their feet. They've done a bunch of different things over time and they've done it, cross industry. So
Yeah.
maybe they don't have 10 years of banking, but they worked on a banking project and they were really good on it for like 2 years. But you're saying it's got to be 10 years. And if your system says, oh, if they're not 10 years, they can't even talk to them. Like, I think that's making a mistake with the way people are setting things up.
Yeah, I would, if I were in a position where we're hiring, I would much rather have the person that's like 80% qualified, but has hustle and they really want that job, which means they're going to care, as the person who's like perfectly qualified and maybe is like, I could give or take the job, because that passion and that interest is going to take them so much further.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's really concerning sometimes because like it seems like sometimes now on some of these posts, all these systems, you gotta post like an influencer, right? And you're trying to get a job. It's like, why do I have to post like I'm on Instagram to get
Yeah.
people to pay attention to me when they're not like I'm trying to find a job. I'm not trying to be an influencer.
Right? There are a couple of thoughts I have on this because yeah, it seems like that. It's like if you are out of work, you have to put on your open to work banner, you have to post, and you have to be out there. But there are some ways that you can kind of actually like not have to do that. One of them is building relationships in key areas called informational interviews, right? So really finding those. And also, I mean, there's so much with applicant tracking systems that are bumping people out because their resume, like you said, wasn't aligned and they're using all this technology. Looking at smaller companies. So
Mm,
like small companies or mid-sized companies that maybe aren't using as much technology, and or they have more flexibility over what kind of applicants they can take because they can train and kind of like maybe the culture fit is more important to them.
yeah,
Some of those things like that can kind of, you know, so you don't have to do some of that posting online and you can find a job in a way that feels more authentic, because I think there's too much out there that it feels that way. I think
yeah.
sometimes
It
for,
feels like, oh, I'm trying to get the algorithm like a Instagram,
yeah.
kind of somebody trying to get a million views. It's like I'm not doing a cat video. I'm trying to get trying to get a job. But the idea that what I found is like, yeah, smaller. I've actually had better success with smaller companies. Maybe that the ATS whatever that wasn't as important to them, and I had relationships. Like I know, like if you over the last 30 years, you build up a Rolodex. So
Mhm.
my last job, the job I'm on right now, I just called the director that I knew. I know the founders of a startup, and he's like, I worked with them a couple of years ago. I said, hey, I need a gig now because I'm a consultant, and I got back in. And it was because of that human connection. And I've
Yeah.
been using like the algorithm, and it wasn't working. And I was paying premium, and I was doing this, and I was doing that, and it was just passing over because I think it's too tight. It's not. I don't think it's human enough. I think it's too robotic, in my opinion. But like, I've been in the industry a while, and I'm seeing a marked difference in what's going on.
Yeah. That relationship aspect is gonna be so much more powerful in the long run. I see people all the time getting opportunities, acts what you just talked about, calling that contact up and kind of seeing where there was a good fit. That was the hidden job market. There's a lot being talked about the hidden job market, and I'm seeing recruiters say, "Oh, it's not real, it's real on LinkedIn."
It's real.
It's very real. It's very real. I've, in my prior career, like prior to being an entrepreneur, I got job offers through the hidden job market. It's all about showing up, being authentic, sharing who you really are, building a relationship, and then like that fit, they'll connect you with somebody else. You know, you find that fit, and you're invited in for interviews that maybe on jobs that aren't posted. It can totally happen.
Yeah, I mean, I know a guy, I know you look about your Rolodex. I know a guy that I used to work with, and he became a director. And I talked to him, and I hadn't thought about asking him about jobs. And
Mhm.
then, he's like, okay, I can pull that card because you got your Rolodex. And sometimes people are like, well, I don't know if I should do that, but sometimes it's like, you got to feel it for yourself. It's like, do you feel that's going to be a problem? Even, I've been friends with him. It's not really a problem. It's just like, we never really talked about that. I never approached it from that point of view. But like I'm saying, just like your personal connections, it's just like I'm a podcaster. I've been a podcaster since 2016. I get referrals from guests, from people who've been on the show. And it just builds this like continual like leads, like a salesperson get lead generation. My dad was a, prudential insurance agent for 30 years, and he was always doing those cold calls. And then he had a Rolodex. He'd go to a family he sold insurance to and go to their cousins and go to their friends. And like he'd just go down the line for the cold calling. But it wasn't totally cold calling. It's like based on who he had
Mhm.
relationships
Yeah, there's a great quote from a former general, and goes something like relationships are built at the speed of trust. And I think like it doesn't take a it sounds like you have a pretty big Rolodex, which is amazing. But some people who might be listening might have a smaller network. You don't have to have a big network. It's just some really good relationships where you can show up, serve, be helpful, and you getting in that job and helping out might be the thing.
with. So what are some of the big mistakes people make today with social media and then the connection to like job searches. I mean, maybe they don't really understand. I don't know. It's one of the mistakes I've seen is like people post things on Facebook and don't really realize that their lawyers, I mean, the employees are looking there. They're
Yep.
looking at your Facebook. It's like, well, they might not tell you what they didn't like, but then they don't pick you.
Yep. Yep. It is fair to say we are past the age of is the potential employer going to look at my social media? Yes, somebody is going to look at your social media most likely. It might not be, in the beginning. It might be way after or something like that, or when they're doing vetting or something. But like your social media is fair game. People are going to see it. If you post something online, it's public, right? Um, Making sure that the rule that I've always had, and this comes from working in government because working in some of those offices, we were super careful about making sure we're always doing the right thing and not doing anything that could cause any negativity for the public official we're working for. And the rule, or like kind of like the thing that we always said is, if you write it or you say it, or if whatever you're doing ends up on the front page of the Dispatch, which was one of our local papers the next day, would you want it there? And most of the time, that was a pretty clear cut. Like,
That's
if you
pretty
wouldn't want it on the cover of the Dispatch or your local newspaper, then don't write it, don't post it, don't say it. And for me, that's been, I mean,
a
it's
rule
always
of
worked
thumb.
out.
It's a rule of thumb.
Yeah, it's worked out. I think sometimes too in this area of the how polarizing politics are, I would stay away from personally, I would stay away from some of those things unless you're looking for a career in politics or the media in which that could help you, because I
Mhm.
think sometimes that stuff can get misconstrued. And I mean, now we have cancel culture where like something you say, I think Blake Lively the other day got canceled for something that she said
Yeah.
years ago. So anything can come back to bite you. It's kind of a scary place to be in, but I would just err on the side of caution.
Yeah, I've run into in some cases. Well, I'm an artist, so but what I've tried to do is I have my artist like stage name Phantom Electric
Mhm.
Ghost, and I don't go around saying my real legal name. I kind of have a separation. Not that
Yeah,
anybody could figure it out, but like it's harder for somebody to find the link between Phantom Electric Ghost and the person who's actually working with the legal name. It's not impossible, but it's not immediately apparent. So I'm kind of keep some separation, kind of like an artist, the author that has a pseudonym.
yeah,
Like sometimes it's better like to have some separation when you're doing something. and this, kind of leave like this is in the art space, this is not. And it is still like a tango because some people like they want to find it, they can find it. But it's art. Like a lot of times it's just like experimental music. So it's it is what it is. But if somebody think no, they don't like experimental music, well, I don't know why you wouldn't pick because of that.
Right? Also, there are probably so many employers and teams who would see like you have this creative side and they would love it and they would want to hire you for another IT role or something because you have this creative side. Right? So for every employer who's going to be like we don't like that, there's going to be someone out there that thinks wow, that's
Yes.
really cool. I mean, it might not be my jam in terms of music, but like that creativity could benefit our team.
Well, it's like the law of attraction. I always say to people, it's like some people get scared to, show their creative capabilities and they
Yeah.
limit themselves because it's like, well, people are going to hate it. And so or it's going to damage me in some way because it's like not, not typical. It's not atypical. But I think a lot of times that people like if you are able to, you know, pull from your creative, side. I've run into a lot of people in my industry that do have kind of creative like hobbies that you would be surprised. There's a lot of people that are painters and photographers, do like theater, and then there are, actuaries, you know, engineers. It's like, yeah, there's people who are like multifaceted. And there's a lot of people, like you said, they kind of were told you should only be the lawyer, you should only be the doctor, you should only be the actuary. And, I think people are finding that doesn't feel good, because I'm not fulfilled.
Yeah, we're not one dimensional. I don't think any human is. There was something you said, I think, in a prior podcast that really struck me. You have, I think you said you published maybe like 5,000 songs.
Yeah, I got a crazy amount of songs. It's up about that many now.
That's wild. But I love that because I heard you say that in a podcast, and I think it related to something you just said about like trying things and putting music out there. Um, so many of the people I talk to are afraid to try something. And so they stay stuck in their careers. And I think you're a perfect example of creating and putting it out there. And probably every one of those songs is not your favorite,
No.
but there are some in there because you've produced so much. There's some really like great gold nuggets in there, I bet too. But you
Yeah,
wouldn't know if it's
yeah,
produced.
it's hard because you put so much out, but a lot of it is like I'm a big believer in like this kind of flow state, stream of consciousness, kind of like jazz fusion. And
Okay.
so like I'm in my recording studio right now with all my synthesizers, but I like to physically just, if I feel like it, I can just run over to my Yamaha, my Moog, or my Roland, and just play. And I'm not like a lot of people today. It's all like electronic, and it's not really like physical instruments. But I'm a keyboard player, piano player, a wind instrument player, and so I actually like to physically play instruments. And sometimes it just comes to you. And I've talked to a lot of authors that kind of get it. So they'll world build, but then they'll sometimes get into a stream of consciousness flow. And that's where their dialogue and other ideas come from. They might even change their original world if something comes that's better than what they planned. And I think that's kind of like the happy accident. Like, are you willing to go with the perceived bad note or unplanned event and take advantage of it when it comes if it seems like,
Mhm.
oh, that is a good idea.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. I mean, if we took that attitude with all of our careers, I feel like we'd all be so much happier.
Yeah, happy accidents like in engineering or science, I mean, it happens a lot. A lot of times we weren't planning on something, we find something. And it was like, this is actually better than what we were planning to do. And then we make the choice to actually go with that because it's actually going to give us a better bang for the buck, or it's innovative. We accidentally find that this thing is doing something we didn't design it to do, but it's actually better than what we wanted it to do.
I love that.
And that happens a lot to a lot of people. You could
Mhm.
be making baking a cake, and it comes out, oh, this is actually better than what I planned. It's like I should actually stick to this version of the recipe, and it was an accident,
That
right?
happens all the time when I'm cooking. Yeah. That's my creative outlet. It's throwing things together. I never follow a recipe. and it always turns out better than I expect than if I just follow the recipe and it's more fun.
Mhm. But, like, the whole idea of burnout is I think if you stay on this kind of phoning it in, being comfortable with the same routine,
Yeah.
then I think eventually that burns you out because it's like it's not it doesn't feel it doesn't feel like you're really living to me. Like, if you get stuck on it where you're just phoning it in, then you're not really engaged, and I think people need to be kinda a little bit uncomfortable to be engaged. Like, he's like David Bowie said it the best, you know, you basically I have to be kinda treading water as an artist to actually feel like I'm actually being an artist.
Yeah, in that stretch zone.
Yeah.
I think one
Yeah.
of the things that surprised me, in this, like, my career journey is that I've learned that you can burn out on the thing you're passionate about too. If you don't have like, if you're all in and you're not focusing on, like, giving yourself some space or boundaries or things like that,
Oh,
and yeah, if you're just if you're not feeling it one day and you just keep pushing, you can burn
yeah.
out on anything, and I think that's one of the misconceptions is, like, if I'm passionate about something and I am able to finally go do that, everything will be perfect, and it doesn't work like that at all.
Yeah, I think, yeah, like, you can overdo it on anything. You know, I've run into musicians, like, before the show, they just over practice. They over practice so much, and then they, like, injure themselves or they get burned
Oh,
out, and then they don't perform. It's like, you don't need if you know it, you know it, right? Don't go crazy
yeah.
trying to be perfect because you're actually gonna wreck it. Because you actually, like, defeat yourself. And I've always been a kind of person, it's like, I'm Buddhist, but it's like, I like to just, like, go to a place and have a quiet place and don't do any of it, right? Just like I know I can do it, so I'm not gonna go crazy trying to over prepare. And I think that's what happens when people get into these like the passionate thing. Sometimes they overdo it. They go like a little too much. It's like they go beyond.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. Absolutely. I mean, I feel like that applies to so much of life.
Yeah, it's always a hard thing. It's hard to avoid, you know, when making mistakes because but dang mistakes sometimes are what you need to have happen because sometimes you need to know like, well, I really don't fit here. I
Yeah.
really should be somewhere else. Or I need to actually learn from this thing that happened and have like that lesson learned, right?
Yeah. I 1000% believe it. I mean, job hopping is an example of that where people might go into a job and they realize they hate it and then they leave. And it's been looked as really negative, but I think there's a positive side of job hopping because you left that thing and you realized what you don't like. That's a
Yeah.
win. You didn't stay there for a decade and thinking you still hate it 9 years later.
Yeah. It's like if you get into, I think people see that now with, relationships where he's like, if it's not working, I'm not just going to stay there because grandpa did. And he's been complaining about it forever. You know, you sometimes it's like
Yeah.
it doesn't work, and then you're like polar opposites, right? Does it really work? Like and there's certain obligation. Okay, you signed the contract, you did this, but it's like now you can live in a world where I don't have to be in a spot where it's like it's just not. It doesn't feel good, right? If it doesn't feel right, if you feel like you're out of sync, right? You're not in
Mhm.
tune. And they do these musical terms, but it's like there's a lot of it's discordant. Why would I be in a place that it's always discordant? How am I ever gonna be really aligned with what I want?
Yeah, that's that values piece, right? Like when you value one thing and you might be living out or not allowing yourself to live into that value, or the opposite, living in values that aren't yours, creates a lot of discord.
You talk about like pivots, like career pivots. What you said you talked about like how you made your major pivots
Yeah.
in such a short time. Is that something that that people should really look at? Because I think a lot of people make a pivot after a long period of time.
Yeah, yeah. So I made a pretty big pivot because I, changed industries and all of the things. I was thinking about a change for a while before I did it. I think it depends on why you're doing the pivot, right? So if you figured out enough things where you're like, I know that this isn't what's working for me and I want to do something else, that's the best time to think about it. But I think one of those things, if you're in something for a long time, it's scary to pivot. So
Mhm.
trying things out, experimenting. Um, Frequently, I will chat with people who are like, "Well, I've been doing this thing. If I leave, it's like, what if I don't like that thing?" And that's a possibility, of course. But how can we design an experiment where you get to try it out? So, like, let's say somebody wants to, I don't know, be something, turn into a creative career, and maybe they're a writing career. I was talking to a poet a couple of months ago who's working on getting published and really wants to make that full time, but they have some other work they're doing. They've done enough of this getting published in their poetry that they know they're passionate about it. They like it. They could make this full time career. That's a really great example of somebody who's tried it out a little bit before just making that huge jump.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of helps soften the blow when you're making a big pivot. For me, it was that pilot that I ran. I was like, I'm going to test this out to see if this is even going to work. When all of my clients met their goals in less than 3 months, I was like, okay, I've got something. I can lean into this.
And then
If
way the yeah, I mean, just to go continue on that is like I see in the market now is a lot of freelance opportunities, right? And there's
Yes.
like volunteer opportunities. So if
Mm,
you were like, okay, like a lot of artists, we have our day job, right? Because
mhm.
we're starving artists kind of idea. But we have their day job and you have your passion project. Well, you could have your day job, right? And you could go freelance and try something that so you're not just jumping into like a I'm going to be a starving artist. I'm going to immediately move to the bohemian neighborhood and I'm going to be the beat poet. I'm just going to go to the coffee shop and I'm going to hang out there. I'm going to quit the job today and go right to the coffee shop. It's like, no, you
Yeah.
don't. You could just show up on Saturday night, right? You could start to
Yeah.
freelance on something. You could volunteer with the theater group because you really want to be in the theater. You want to start working on somehow get into it and you find a way to get like some kind of job. You jump into it. And that's how you can kind of ease into things, right?
Yeah, 1000%. And there's so much opportunity out there now to do all of that, whether it's volunteered or it's going on Upwork and taking a sample project to see if you even like it. Um, it's also like going back to the piece about being multifaceted. There's, nothing wrong with having like what you're doing right now, you have that IT career and then you have this creative stuff. It's probably the perfect blend for you in some ways because it balances you out. And people get sometimes, at least I have, long ago in the past too, felt that I needed to have, like, my career be everything. And so it
Mhm.
had to be my passion, and it had to be my revenue generating, it had to be all of these things, and being able to unbuckle that a little bit and see, like, all areas of life. If you look at, like, that life wheel and being able to, like, have different things going on, having a
Yeah.
pottery class on the side and having that career and having those pieces, that's what builds a full life.
Yeah, it's like, life is kind of kaleidoscopic, that's why I always kind of look at it. But like I know a lot of people that I didn't realize that were multifaceted, but they kind of had a mask on and didn't know
Mhm.
because they were kind of hiding it. But it seems like now it's actually more, it's okay. Cause I think a lot of the career jobs kind of expect you to put like so many hours in that you have no possibility of doing the other things. And I found there were some career paths I had to get out of because they were putting me on that train. And I was like, I am not putting 99 to 120%. So I have no room to do my music. So I have no room to do
Mhm.
podcasts. I have no room to do any art. I have no room to do my mountain biking. Like I have certain things that make life good. If I get a job, it's like I can never mountain bike. It's like, why would I do that? Because that is a big part of what I want to do. I think you have to make choices. You have to start putting your foot down and, creating boundaries. Because I
Mhm.
think some jobs will have it so that there's no boundary. They want you to totally be in the job, and that's just the way it is. But like, you don't have to ride that train.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing in that is you've really found a life makeup for you where you get to live out your values, and it sounds like you're having a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, I think you got to make fun a priority. And a lot of people look at that as, well, that's shameful. That's not mature. And like artists, we always get, accused of being a little immature. But I think it keeps us, keeps it kind of on your, feeling good. Is that kind of childlike curiosity or childlike things like, why can't I do that? Like when you're 9 years old, you jump on that bike and you keep on falling off because nobody told you that that you shouldn't do that. But then as you get older, people say, well, you shouldn't try that because you're going to get hurt. No, it's like you never try anything different because, like, oh, when you're kids, it's like, oh, I'm just gonna do it till I figure it out. I'm jump on my skateboard till I keep on falling down. I'm gonna keep on doing it till I figure it out.
Yeah, it's that element of play. There's been a lot, talked about in, like, modern psychology around the element of play that we just don't have. It's creatives have more of it. It probably allows you to be fun and creative, and if you don't have that element of play, life can get
Yeah,
pretty,
I think people get depressed. I think sometimes people look at creativity and playfulness and they act like, well, that's not me, and they're kind of shamed out of it. They're kind of told like, well, that's being immature, or that's being reckless, or that's like, something that you do, when you're in high school or college, and you get out of it. And
yeah.
what I found is like in the creative space, like people keep that childlike curiosity, it never goes away. I run into like blues guys in New Orleans, they never stopped. They're like 80 years old, 70 years old. Nobody told them like it's a young kid's game. It's like, no, I can keep on playing until I'm not here.
That.
you
I
know?
love Yeah, and I would argue the people who are having fun and have a creative outlet are probably so much better in every other area of their life because they have that.
Yeah, I think there's this open-mindedness and a kind of expansive mindset instead of a narrow minds. I think people get stuck in their lane. And I think it's hard to pivot if you feel like you have to stay in a lane. If you're more willing to kind of cross lanes and take things from different genres or take different career paths, like I took the idea you could take a liberal arts kind of, you know, political science, sociology, and mix that with technology. The ability to write a paper, to do the research, to communicate, to talk to people is actually useful within IT. The mathematics alone and the physics alone and the algebra and the calc, that's not enough. You actually have to have some of those skills from the other arts, the liberal arts, to actually fully complete the picture. And
Mhm.
some people are like, "Oh, I wouldn't think that." It's like, yeah, that's the way it is.
It's fascinating. It kind of unlocks some other ways of thinking where, I mean, if any tech entrepreneur didn't have creativity, I'm not sure we would have a lot of innovation.
Yeah, there's a lot of arts. I mean, it's like a
Mhm.
lot of tech companies have artists, get people that went to Berkeley, people who are graphic artists, people who are, they do, video game industry is full of artists doing
Yeah.
paintings, backgrounds, character design. My daughter does all kinds of character design. She's a graphic artist and she, does something for Madison Avenue, does something for, companies that are using it for backgrounds or physical, parts of things that you wouldn't think they would need it, but there's art everywhere.
Mhm.
It's like there's music everywhere. Madison Avenue needs music all the time.
Yep.
So there's you don't have to be the biggest star in on Spotify to actually work in music because you could do sync licensing for films and commercials and TV shows and video games, and you could just have 30 seconds of something and you make more money than you do on a song on the top 20. So it's like people don't have to be looking for this fame game. Sometimes you do it because you love it, and then the law of attraction brings opportunities to you that
Yeah.
you wouldn't think you'd have.
I mean, absolutely. I think too often, I think in most industries, we look at like the 1% as like they're successful, nobody else is. But there's a lot of range in there for life-changing work, life-changing money that's not at the top or that influencer. Like you look at influencers, and I think the more young people I talk to, like that is like top career choice. And there's so much within that you don't have to be the top to find a lot of fulfillment, fun, money, success, all of
Yeah,
it.
there's different levels of like influencers. You don't have to be like the million view,
Yeah.
billion view influencer. Like you can do it at like micro levels, kind of like you think about independent artists, like or indie artists or
Yeah.
underground artists. Sometimes you get an artist, maybe their fan base is 50,000, 100,000. On Spotify, that doesn't make enough money to live. But if you're an indie artist and you tour and you're in a Nashville or you go to like LA or you go to New York, you go to these scenes, you could even go to Netherlands. You go to Australia. You could find. I found these little, small artists that are able to tour, go to Denmark, go to Japan, and they
Yeah.
find these niche art audiences, and they're able to survive with a fan base that the big labels would say you can't. They would never hire you. But
Do
if you're willing not to live to excess, you can actually have a longer career than the one hit wonder. You could actually still be doing it for 10, 15, 20 years because you found a way to kind of be sustainable.
and loving what you're doing too. I
Yeah.
mean, that sounds like a recipe for a really rewarding, fun career.
Well, it's just like anybody that does a startup or anybody that does that has their own business, their entrepreneur. I mean, within the arts, it's like the entrepreneurship. It's like you are an entrepreneur, right? You have to figure out. It's not wrong to make money if you believe in the art and you feel your art's gonna affect people. You find ways to monetize your art and make it sustainable. And I
Yeah.
think, like anything, like whether you're starting a business or a service, it's the same game. But a lot of times artists feel like, oh, making money's evil. So then they kind of put shame on money. And it's like that's not necessarily the right way to think about it.
I completely agree. There's somebody in my area who's a coach, and she works with a lot of artists, and she always talks about like if all of the artists in the community had, their work was sold and they had more money, how our values in our communities would change if artists had more money. And I love this concept because it opens up for an opportunity of like, how would our values shift? If every artist in your community had more spending power, more buying power, your community and economy would shift. And I think there's like some interesting interplay of the values that could be explored through that.
Yeah, 'cause I think we're living in an age because of AI, because of robotics, because of automation. You have these like micro, like level businesses. They on micro level, entrepreneurs. They like because you can, 3D printer, AI,
Mhm.
robotic technology out of your basement, out of your house. You could actually have a production capability. You could actually do something as a small business that you could have never done 20 years ago and actually produce things. And there's a
Yeah.
lot of people doing that. And then you have the freedoms like, oh, you're actually running your own business. And just like if you ever had a pizza shop or a restaurant, now that's opened up beyond those things, beyond just having a franchise. You could actually have an idea that you can actually bring from A to Z and get it out.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, the changes we've experienced just in the past 5 years with technology, I could never have imagined being able to serve clients across the country. I've had a client in India, and it's blown my mind that that would never have been possible without Zoom.
Yeah. I mean, the tech, like with this podcast, I talk to people like every country
Yeah,
on the planet. And 5 years ago, I couldn't have done it
yeah,
the way I'm doing it now. And, they just exponentially gets better all the time. The quality of the signal gets better, the quality of the video,
yeah.
the ability to reach out to different markets. So you never know. Like if you just think about, like, I'm just staying within the US. A lot of times, though, I've found with a lot of people who are creators, like your audience sometimes is way beyond your neighborhood, way beyond your country. And it's like, wow, it's like we live in such a global community. I actually worked in Japan for 2 years, and a lot of things that in terms of business, like there are opportunities to be. I was an expat, living in Tokyo with my family,
Cool.
and because of COVID, we haven't looked at that again. But there's a lot of opportunity and being willing to put yourself into that expat role. I mean, a lot of people come to the U.S., but how many Americans think of doing the reverse? Like, why don't you go to like Dubai? Why don't you go to, India? Why don't you
Mhm.
go somewhere, right? Germany, anywhere. It's like there are opportunities to do things, and that you find your life might be more exciting.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. You've really seen a lot of the changes too because you've been in this game since 2016, right? Like, I mean,
Mhm.
technology, I bet it's changed wildly in that time.
Yeah, when I first started, I was on an app called Spearmint. It was just an iPhone app. It was
Okay.
just like you just you talked into your iPhone, and you would
Yeah,
usually the podcast would just be me talking, and then eventually, sometime in 2017, they made it so I could actually talk to other people, but it was all audio,
okay.
and the
Okay.
quality of audio wasn't as good as this mic, because it's coming through the phone. And that was 2016, 2017 phone tech, not 2024 tech. So, if I go back and look at those episodes, like, oh, those aren't that great. But yeah, it just kept on, expanding with the ability to simulcast, the ability to find guests, the ability to do SEO, to do AI, to do all kinds of automations, workflow automations. There's like so many things now. I mean, I don't even have a team. Where I know some podcasters, they have like a whole team. I'm able
Yeah.
to do a lot of automation. I do it all. It's all me. I don't have any assistants.
Wow.
So it's there's a lot of capability. The fact that you could do it without having to pay anybody to be your assistant, that's kind of cool.
That's fascinating because I've heard a lot of podcasters have like a whole production team.
Yeah, I
It's
don't
really interesting.
do that. Well, yeah, because if you, I'm taking advantage of the tech that exists. But some people might not know how to do that. But we're living in an age where the tech exists, so I use it because I have my foot in door, I have a foot in the door on that because I do that for my day job, so it gives me an advantage. Um, but like you said, a lot of it's just looking things up, and it's like this, there's so many things you can just look up without taking a course. You can learn like anything off of YouTube when it's not, it's not fraudulent stuff. It's actually real stuff. Like people actually
Yeah,
giving away free lessons. It's like that's pretty cool.
you can learn anything. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, because I think a lot one of the things I look at is like we're living in an age right now of big transition. It's kind of like horse and buggy, from horse and buggy to like car automobile. When that change happened, all the people that were associated with taking care of horses, you know, with the barns and the horses and the people doing the shoe, the horseshoes and switched to like, oh, you have to know how to work on a car. But there was job loss with people, farmers and people who were taking care of horses. That's kind of
Mhm.
dropped off, and you had to learn a new tech, and that was probably some of those people didn't cross over.
Yeah.
Um, the thing I guess that's scarier now is it's very fast. Like the tech that exists right now can actually replace a lot of jobs all at once, and so that's kind of frightening. And the thing is, I think our educational system hasn't taught people to be the creative type of person. A lot of people want to just be able to kind of be the assembly line person or the cubicle person. And we're going into the age of you need to like have analytical thinking. You need to
Mhm.
be able to deal with a lot of data. And how many people are great at calculus and algebra and those skills in our country? Like if you look at the scores, we don't score that well. And that's the world that's kind of coming is you need to actually go lean on those things, or you have to lean on your creativity, which a lot
Mhm.
of people were told that, oh, you can't be creative unless you're Taylor Swift. you know, so it's like people are going to have to kind of adjust. Like there's a big, range between being Taylor Swift and actually still you can be creative without you have to be at her level.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And I think everyone has some form of creativity in them, whether or not they have tapped into it or express it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's really important. It's just 'cause I think it's scary. I think people get scared. And we kind of need some assistance in our society to say we're in a transitional moment.
Mhm.
Maybe people need to be given some space to learn. Maybe people need some training, And I know a lot of companies I've always kind of is like with AI, it's like I've done a lot of self-training on AI. But my opinion is if a company has business experts, they've been doing something for 20 years, it'd actually be very smart to teach that person AI because that person actually has the business knowledge that they want to bring into the learning library. They want to bring into the prompt engineering. Just hiring somebody from Silicon Valley that knows everything about machine learning, that's great. That's what they know, but they don't know your business.
Mhm.
So you don't need to get rid of all those people. You need to actually train those people how to use the tool.
Yeah, then you don't lose that institutional knowledge, the relationships, all of those other pieces that are already there.
Yeah, but I think it's some kind of a fad among the executives and the big, the C-suite. It's like, oh, we can just get rid of those people and just go with AI. I think they're making a mistake.
I think the blended approach that you're talking about, I think definitely sounds like a great way to go as opposed to that.
So if people go to your website, value-based careers, like, is that how they book things with you or to get information on how to connect to the programs you offer?
Yep, they can. So when you go to my website, you can check out one of my upcoming events. I have several each month. You can also book a career conversation and learn more about my work. And I'm also on LinkedIn for those who want to connect that way.
Oh, cool. Yeah, we do post this podcast on our LinkedIn page.
Okay,
So
nice.
we push it there, and so that will be part of it. And yeah, that's a good place for learning and connections. And because we need to post every day. but but it's another way to keep do that going. But I want to thank you for being a guest on the show, and it's been great talking to you about the idea of finding your kind of niche in your heart in your life. I think that's a cool place to be.
Thank you for having me. It's been a fun chat, and I love talking to creatives. So this has been great.
Thank you and have a great night. And again, we were live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. We will be available on all the other podcast services where you can listen to or watch a podcast by tomorrow. Thank you for being a guest on the Family Electric Ghost podcast.
Thank you.